Sub 46% win rate in solo queue through all ranks, but popping off in professional games? What's up with that? Hello summoners and welcome to another ProGuides video. I'm Zyrene and today we're going to be discussing why some champions suck in solo queue while being OP picks in pro play. So I'm sure you've seen plenty of cases of this in your own games. Your teammates insta-lock some champ, inspired by the last game we saw at Worlds, but instead of completely dominating the lane and carrying teamfights, he dies 2 times early and contributes nothing but his forfeit vote at 15 minutes. So how do the pros make some champions look so good while the average Joe in solo queue looks like they don't have hands when they're piloting what should be the exact same champion? We'll be looking at a few champions in particular to answer that very question. But first, today's question of the day is, what champion do you think is OP in solo queue but would never work in pro play? While the champions in this video thrive in a highly skilled, coordinated environment, we want to know which champions are the exact opposite, thriving in the chaotic clown fiesta of solo queue. Be sure to let us know your answers in the comments below. We really do love hearing what you guys have to say, especially with fun questions like these. And one last thing, be sure to visit us at ProGuides.com. We have the best roster of coaches, top-tier live classes from instructors like Mike Young and Saskio, and courses covering a variety of roles and champions from your favorite pro players like Doublelift. I also highly recommend you to try out our VOD review feature. The way it works is you send in a replay file, and the coach sends you back a fully reviewed VOD. It's a super convenient option that is incredibly helpful, so give it a try. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be taking a look into what makes some champions work in pro play that are just downright horrible in solo queue. In fact, one of these champions is almost never played in the same role in solo queue that it is in Worlds, and when it is, it has one of the lowest win rates in that role. Meanwhile, at Worlds, that same champion is present in over 90% of the games, with the vast majority of that being bans. But before we get into the specific champions, let's talk about why there are some differences in champion strength between solo queue and pro play. As you probably know in our meta videos, we covered the best for solo queue based mostly on how they are performing overall in solo queue. And we explain why they are so strong, what they bring to the table, and how to utilize them. The thing is, the best champions in solo queue are good because, at least over the course of dozens or hundreds of games, those champions should have favorable matchups in the meta. But in professional play, it's not that simple. The really strong picks are those that can be blind picked because they either have no real counters or they can be flexed to another role when they are counter picked. In pro play, blinding something that is S tier but has blatantly strong counters in the meta is not going to go over too well. Let's take a look at a pick from our OP picker ban video from patch 10.21. Karthus was one of our junglers, and in solo queue, he does really well. He can farm safely for the most part, and he scales incredibly hard. So if the enemy can't close out the game, there's a good chance you can come back into it. But at Worlds right now, the 2 most contested junglers are Nidalee and Graves. Both champions are able to be played extremely aggressively, and if someone picked Karthus, either champion could easily invade, steal his camps, and maybe even kill Karthus himself. Besides being bullied, he doesn't really offer much pressure, and teams will starve him out and close out games before he can really contribute much. Nidalee and Graves both have quick and healthy clears, and with their mobility, they can counter jungle and escape danger anytime they need to, making it so that in even bad matchups where they can't fight the enemy jungler, they can always outmaneuver, farm up, and look to gank elsewhere with better pathing. So with that bit explained, let's take a look at some of the worst offenders in the OP and Pro, bad in solo queue category. We'll start things off with Tahm Kench. If you guys have seen our worst champs on 10.21 video, you should know that we strongly recommend that you don't pick Tahm Kench in solo queue. Aside from his horrible win rate, he just feels really bad to lane with. And in solo queue, having a miserable feeling early game can be enough to tilt an ADC who is left feeling like they're laning 1v2. It's even worse if the enemy takes a double ranged bot lane, and imagine taking the poke from a Caitlyn Zyra lane while all your support does is twiddle their thumbs because they literally can't do anything else. And don't forget, supports are usually supposed to carry the bot lane through poke, sustain, or engage. So why is he so good in pro play? Well, with perfect wave manipulation and understandings of when to trade, Tahm Kench lanes are survivable, with some players even making him work as an aggressive support with Hail of Blades against other melee champions. But in solo queue, trying anything like this is almost guaranteed to go poorly. Taking too much harassment before going all in results in a very benched Kench. But his real role in professional games has nothing to do with his lane. It's how broken his W is. The ability serves as a budget QSS plus Kayle ultimate hybrid. Leona or Ashe Arrow hits the ADC in lane? Doesn't matter. Tahm Kench saves the ADC for free. Camille ultis a carry with Galio ultimate incoming? Tahm Kench is pretty much the only way to survive that otherwise unavoidable combo. Tahm's W solely makes him worth the pickup in these extra high level games. While in solo queue, you usually lack the coordination and communication to make the best of it. I know I've personally had ADCs flash away from me to escape an enemy and still die when I could have just eaten them to buy time for our team to help peel. So if you're gonna automatically lose lane and can't really coordinate with your team to make use of the most useful part of your kit, I hope you can see why in solo queue he just doesn't have the same impact or really any impact at all. Now let's take a look at Azir. Practically since his release, Azir has been a champion that pops in and out of the meta with the pros, being especially popular in slow scaling, tank-heavy metas. At the moment, he's still a somewhat contested pick with the pros, drawing some bans at Worlds, but in solo queue, if you ban him, you're crazy. He's practically free low if the enemy takes him. There are two major reasons Azir is pickable by pros, and does really bad in solo queue. First, the most obvious one is the absurdly high mechanical skill floor and ceiling he brings. Just to play him at an okay level, you have to have some damn good mechanics. And to draw out the most of him, you have to literally be Faker. But the second reason here may be a bit overlooked. Currently in solo queue, when you look at the most popular and highest performing champions in mid, a lot of them are assassins. In pro play, smarter laning, wards, and communication all come together to prevent assassins from snowballing constantly. But in solo queue, they run rampant. All in all, it takes one mistake in lane as Azir for an assassin to use that window to blow you up. And with a kit as hard to pilot as Azir, you will slip up. Once that assassin is ahead, from either killing you or your teammates that ignored your spam pinging, you can't do much as they snowball out of control and kill you over and over and over. So between his super steep mechanical requirements and the meta being chock full of hard counters, Azir just doesn't stand a chance outside of the realm of gods. Next up, we'll talk about another mid laner in Lucian. He's the most contested champion at Worlds 2020, ignoring play-ins. Between groups and the knockout stage, he has had a 94% presence in his games, with the exact numbers being 9 picks and 51 bans. Teams absolutely fear Lucian. In the 9 games he's gotten, he's won 6 times. Lucian is a lane bully, able to win most or all matchups 1v1, and if he gets ahead, he runs with it, able to solo kill his opponent over and over. On top of that, his damage scaling is crazy, and with the Manamune into crit build, he has an incredible mid-game power spike. So with all of that said, it may sound like I'm trying to sell you on Lucian, but just wait a second before you insta-lock him in solo queue. All of the things that make him work and make him OP in pro play almost work against him in solo queue. Lucian is a dominant mid laner with tons of damage, but that damage is all he provides. And when you're playing Lucian, you're actually pretty short-ranged, so you're going to want to dash in if you want to be aggressive. This aggression can easily lead to your downfall, making you an easy gank target. Without your own jungler backing up your aggression, you can't exactly use your early game strength if you're being camped. And all it takes is a couple of deaths to feel incredibly behind. Remember, I just got through saying you offer damage and damage alone. With no utility or CC to provide, once you're out of the game, it can be a struggle to get back into it. If you're playing some of the easier standard mid lane picks like Orianna or Annie, at least you have CC and AoE damage to provide in team fights. Speaking of bringing extra CC or utility, that's another reason why he works in pro play. Usually, when a team composition drafts a champion like Lucian, they make up for it with extra utility on champions later on in the draft. But in solo queue, when you pick Lucian mid, your jungle and support aren't going to change those Graves and Senna hovers. They are here for fun, after all. By the way, this isn't one of those picks like Azir, where at least in Challenger solo queue, the champion does okay. Even at the top of the top, Lucian is in the red. So no matter how good you think you are, it's not worth it when you aren't coordinating with 4 other players. The last champion we're going to talk about is Gangplank. At one point in time, he was a completely dominant force in all levels of play, but that was the past. This is the now. And as things stand, he's a pretty awful pick in solo queue. In fact, when looking at overall stats, the only champions with lower win rates than GP top are champions you should never see in the lane in the first place. So, what's the big deal? If you want to see why GP's at the bottom, you should first look at who's thriving at the top. Urgot, Jax, Fiora, Kayle, and Shen are 5 of the most played champions in solo queue, and unless GP has perfect mechanics, he doesn't really have a good time laning against any of them, especially the ranged champions. And with his kit being so hard to use, I can promise practically none of us have perfect GP mechanics. So with 4 hyperscaling split pushers that beat him naturally in lane, and a tank that can follow his ultimate and solo kill him harder, being so strong in the meta, it's no wonder he's such a bad pick for the majority of us players in solo queue. So for starters, in pro play, they help eliminate some of those weaknesses just due to the massive gap in skill those players have over us plebs. Between their wave management mechanics and ability to coordinate lane assignments at mid and late game, those players are able to farm up safely, even zoning opponents in lane with skilled barrage usage. Pro play also makes the most out of global ultimates. With a coordinated team, GP can even start fights from across the map, cutting off the enemy's escape with a massive slow. But in solo queue, half the time, your team just walks away, leaving you with a massive cooldown for nothing. So to recap, GP sucks if any of the following are true. Number 1, your mechanics aren't perfect with his Q and barrels. Number 2, you don't have godly wave management. Number 3, you don't use ultimate at the right fights at the right time. And number 4, you don't manage to keep up farm through lane assignments in the mid to late stages of the game. Honestly, I would definitely leave that one to the pros that know what they're doing, and you should too. And that is it for today. I hope you have a bit more of an understanding as to why champions are awful in solo queue, but are contested picks when it comes to the professionals. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to let us know who you think is great in solo queue, but would never work in pro play in the comments below. I can't wait to see you guys back at the next video, but until then, good luck on the Rift, stay safe, and wash those hands. See you later.